Almost $4 trillion of some of the hottest tech names are going to be joining the US stock market in the next 6 to 8 months. I'm talking about SpaceX, OpenAI, and Anthropic. These are going to be the largest initial public offerings of all time, and they're going to stress test the way public markets function. And in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down the IPO valuations of these three companies, when you can expect the IPOs to hit, why these companies having a low float value when they hit the market matters, and most importantly, for all those passive index investors, including your retirement account, what it's going to mean to have these three companies included in the indexes. Let's get into it. So the first thing you have to understand is, what are the IPO valuations for these companies? So SpaceX is going to be the largest IPO of all time. SpaceX actually bought out XAI, and XAI actually bought out X, the social media company. So all these companies are combined under the SpaceX umbrella. And they intend to IPO at a record $2 trillion. And they're expecting to IPO sometime in the June, July timeframe. They've already filed their IPO paperwork. And then right on their heels, we're expecting fourth quarter 2026 or very early 2027 is going to be OpenAI. And most people are anticipating that they're going to IPO around $1 trillion. And then Anthropic is also scheduled to be late fourth quarter 2026 or early 2027. And they're IPOing somewhere in the range of 600 to 800 billion. So in the private markets right now, they're valued at 380 billion, but their revenue run rate has been on a crazy ramp. So their annual revenue just at the end of 2025 was 9 billion a year. But when they looked at their projections again a few weeks ago, they're on track to make 30 billion a year. They're growing their revenue at a rate that has never been seen in a company. So I would expect that they'll IPO a lot higher than their private market valuation right now, which is around 380 billion. And there's some hedge funds and some private market money that is actually trying to buy into Anthropic ahead of this IPO, and they're trying to value them around 800 billion. As of this video, they've decided not to take that funding. They want more control over the shares of their company. But clearly, there's a huge demand for Claude, Claude Code, Opus 4.6. All of these enterprise clients are clamoring for Anthropic's product. So now let's talk about float. So float is the portion of a company's shares that are actually available to be traded back and forth. And that small amount of float is going to dictate the price of all the rest of the shares. So usually to get included in an index, you need at least a 10% float. So 10% of whatever your market cap valuation is, 10% of that value needs to be available as shares that the public can buy and purchase. But SpaceX, the first one to IPO in June or July, actually intends to have a very low float volume. They expect to only have about a 5% float when they IPO. And the reason this matters is because the demand is going to be very high for their stock. So if you have a very high demand and you have very low supply, that's going to cause the stock price to absolutely skyrocket. You have all this buying pressure into a very small supply of shares. And some of the indexes, like the NASDAQ and the S&P 500, are actually making adjustments to their rules to fast track SpaceX, OpenAI, and Anthropic into their index. They are bending the rules, they are adjusting their float requirements, and they want them on their index as quickly as possible. So, generally, when a company goes from private to public, they have to wait an entire year of being listed for everything to kind of stabilize out before they get included into the index. They're trying to shrink that timeline from 1 year to 15 days. And if you include a massive $2 trillion company into the NASDAQ or the S&P 500 with only a 5% float, what's going to happen is all the ETFs that are indexing against those indexes are going to be forced to buy in. And it's going to create tremendous buying pressure on their stock. And it is going to skyrocket. So, in your mind, you're thinking, well, that means I should just buy in at IPO, right? Not exactly. So, everyone who's bought into SpaceX, OpenAI, Anthropic before they IPO, they can't sell right when the company goes public. They actually have to wait 6 months after that initial public offering before they can actually liquidate their shares. So you're going to have this low float for the first 6 months of SpaceX being included in the index. And then at the 6 month point, the market is going to be flooded with liquidity in SpaceX. And that is going to cause a lot of volatility. I would expect the price to crater. I would expect it to come down significantly at this 6 month point as people seek to take profits from how far the stock is going to run up. And a similar situation is going to play out for OpenAI and Anthropic. Massive IPOs with low float, with a lot of people invested in the private markets who are locked up and can't sell into the 6 month point. So if you're thinking about buying into these companies, wait. Don't buy them right away because you're already going to get exposure to them through the index. And then when the 6 month point hits, there's a good chance that those companies revisit their initial IPO prices or could potentially even dip below their initial IPO prices. If you are a passive index investor, which is honestly one of the most efficient ways to invest, these IPOs are going to be taking you for a wild ride over the next year. They're going to get listed, the prices are going to spike, and then at the 6 month point after their listing, you should expect a significant dip. It's nothing to be worried about. That doesn't mean that they're bad companies. It's just how the mechanics of these massive multi-trillion-dollar IPOs are going to play out.
No, don't like that.
And you might be thinking, I don't want to be a part of any of this. This volatility sounds crazy. And just because the mechanics behind all this sound terrible doesn't mean that these three companies are actually terrible companies. So, SpaceX, for example, the bull case for SpaceX is that they plan to start launching to the moon. They want to build a mining facility on the moon and building data centers in space. So AI is requiring so much compute and so much energy that SpaceX is betting that the best way to do it is get the energy from the sun by using solar in space and having the compute up there. There's less regulation, you have infinite energy, and you can just port that compute down to Earth. They're guessing that this is going to be a massive market. And if all they were doing was mining on the moon, that would be a multi-trillion-dollar operation, which would be hard to value. So the long-term prospects for SpaceX are very, very bright. So SpaceX is a bit of a moonshot, but if it pans out, you could end up making money over the long term in that company. And Elon Musk has a history of exceeding people's expectations. So even if you don't like the idea of investing, launching things to the moon and mining there, I would not bet against Elon. And then the bull case for Anthropic is pretty straightforward. They are enterprise companies' first choice when it comes to integrating AI. And you can see this in how their revenue run rate has increased. That ramp from an annual of 9 billion to 30 billion in just under 3 months. They are one of the most rapidly growing companies in the world. And they are extremely focused on attracting enterprise clients. And on the other hand, you have OpenAI, which is essentially the Kleenex of AI companies. Everyone knows of ChatGPT. They refer to ChatGPT as the verb. And when you reach that level of market saturation, it is hard to penetrate and steal away market share. They are trying to diversify out into physical products. So there's a rumor that they're coming out with some sort of pen or physical AI that you can wear on yourself. They are trying to attract more enterprise clients like Anthropic is doing to grow their revenue. And they are already the consumer AI of choice. They have billions and billions of monthly users, and they're trying to integrate ads to monetize all those recurring consumer users. And if you think about Google, it was kind of the same model. They dominated the search market. And once they dominated the search market, they integrated ads and started cranking up the revenue. I think OpenAI is trying to accomplish a very similar thing, but they have to focus in on the sequence in which they want to do it. It seems like they're trying to get some ground in enterprise and then pursue the consumer. But this company's not going away. They're in a very solid spot to grow moving on into the future. So, full disclosure, I have exposure to all three of these companies in the private market. I own some XAI, I own some OpenAI, and I own some Anthropic. We are heavily invested in these three companies. I see AI as the largest market opportunity to build wealth in my lifetime and probably your lifetime. So I anticipate there's going to be a ton of volatility in the short term, but I'm willing to ride that out. I'm willing to wait at least a decade after IPO holding these companies. I might take some profits at some point if the price goes absolutely crazy, but I'm invested for the long term. And the biggest takeaway from all of this is that these three companies are going to completely reshape how the public markets work. We've never seen IPOs this big in the history of the stock market, and definitely not in such short sequence, one after another. I know it feels like there's this infinite supply of money just sitting somewhere, but there really isn't. There's only so much capital to go around. So, depending on the sequence in which Anthropic and OpenAI IPO, one of them could be left scraping the bottom of the barrel, getting enough capital to invest for their IPO. And everyone in real time is going to be able to see how SpaceX's low float, fast track inclusion into an index plays out before Anthropic and OpenAI ever IPO. So that may make the public markets a bit more skittish in giving them those lofty valuations. We're just going to have to see how this plays out. And if today's video gave you some insight on the looming massive IPOs from SpaceX, OpenAI, and Anthropic, and what it could mean for your investment portfolio, like the video, subscribe to the channel, because I try and provide insights like this every single week. Keep getting 1% better every day, and I'll catch you next time.
Understand the market, keep your vision on the prize, building up the wealth right in front of your eyes. Talk Higgins, yeah, we keep it moving. Talk Higgins, watch the wealth improving. Markets and the money making sense of the math, helping you navigate the financial path. Talk Higgins, subscribe for the vision. Stay smart, stay invested. We out.